Hello and welcome to FPL Mate. Today I thought we would go back and have a look at a video I made last year about unpopular opinions and hot takes for the 2021-22 season. You can tell this video was made at the height of COVID because, I mean, look at that hair. So we're going to go through some of these predictions basically and see if any came true. Some very much did and some went so horribly badly it is hilarious. So without further ado guys, let's go through some of these kind of messages I received last year, the hot takes, the unpopular opinions, and see what the results were. So this first one was Ike Nouri would be the best 4.5 million defensive option this season. I guess this was made just before we were all kind of selecting our team. So we were kind of looking for our game week 1 teams. We were looking for that cheap defender. It turns out Ike Nouri was not the 4.5 million defender for us. And if you've looked at FPL recently, you will know that Ike Nouri is now 4.1 million because it was so overhyped at the beginning of the season that everyone ended up selling him and his prices dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped. The actual best 4.5 million defenders from last year were actually Cody, Dyer, Anderson, Guehi and Janssen. So interestingly, the top 5 4.5 million defenders that scored the highest scoring players from 2021-22 were actually centre back. So I don't know if that's something we need to take into consideration for next season. Do we actually need to go for those 4.5 million centre backs from those teams that are kind of, I guess, middling defensively? I think that could be the one to go for. Tony will score more points than DCL Watkins, Antonio Bamford and Iheanacho. Now, this actually wasn't far from being true. Tony ended up being the 5th highest scoring forward, although there wasn't too much competition. Kane, Ronaldo, Pukki, and only Antonio out of the list you see on screen actually beat him. So, actually, you know, this was pretty accurate, not too bad. Ivan Toney's ownership will drop from 35% in game week 1 to less than 15% by game week 7. I can actually tell you guys that it happened sooner than that. Tony was a really hyped up player before the season started just because he scored so many goals in the championship. And yes, he did finish the season very well, but Tony had a pretty tragic start to the season. He only scored 2 goals in his first 11 appearances for Brentford in the Premier League. And his ownership dropped to less than 15% by game week 5. So it's actually even quicker than the prediction says. Lamptey is overhyped. Yeah, he was overhyped. He only started 16 games all season. That is pretty poor. You know, we expected a lot from Lamptey, but only if you played a lot of games. He didn't play a lot of games, and even in those games, he didn't deliver quite as much as we kind of hoped for. So Lamptey ended up being a bit of an L in terms of our pre-season picks. Gabriel Jesus will score more than 20 goals this season, 8.5 million, as City end up not buying Kane. So they thought we had a good striker here. For 8.5 million, we could get something really, really good here. Well, the part of it was right. Kane didn't end up going to City, and Jesus actually ended up scoring 8 goals and getting 8 assists, which isn't quite 20. I would say Jesus was not a great pick in general over the course of the season, but if you owned him at the right moments, he really did bang, particularly at the beginning of the season and at the end of the season. Everywhere in the middle, it was pretty much a wasteland. Ferran Torres will be City's main goal threat. Well, he played the first 4 games and he actually scored 2 in that time. Then he got injured and then he left for Barcelona in January. So, yeah, L. So 2 people said the same thing here, that Chilwell will be the highest scoring defender of the season. And this was almost true in a funny way. I know Chilwell only ended up playing 7 games because of the injury, but he had the best points per game of any defender. So he had 7.86 points on average per game in those 7 games, which is higher than any defender. If he continued and played all season, Chilwell could have very, very possibly been the highest scoring defender of the season. So definitely one to look out for next season. You know, when he's fit again and available again, we know he's back on the bench, for example. So I think this could actually be a really interesting point to take forward. It didn't quite come off in 2021-22 because of that injury, but maybe Chilwell is next year's highest scoring defender. Maybe. Andy Robertson will finish on more points than Bruno Fernandes. Yep, that definitely happened. Robertson scored 186 points and Bruno scored 156 points. So Robertson was just like way ahead of Bruno in that regard. Sadio Mane outscores Bruno Fernandes. Yes, that happened as well. Mane 186 points, Bruno 156 points. So yeah, again, Bruno just did not have the season a lot of people hoped he would. Mane will have more points than De Bruyne, and this one did not come off. Mane was on 186 points. KDB ended up on 196 points. So it was kind of close, 10 points in it. And you know what? Save for those final few games, you know, when KDB scored like a million goals in that one game that absolutely decimated my rank personally. But if that was to not have happened, or, you know, he only scored 2 in that game or something like that, or you know, 1 and an assist or something like that, then that completely changes the whole season, just that one game, and Mane could have actually ended up outscoring KDB, but overall, King KDB takes the dub. Raul Jimenez will be the highest scoring attacker after Kane. Well, he ended up being the 14th highest scoring forward in the game, which is, you know, really bad considering there was no competition for forwards at all. It was the worst season ever in terms of FPL forwards, and Jimenez was still 14th, so this was very, very wrong. Danny Ings will be in the top 3 scoring forwards. He was 12th, not quite as bad as the Jimenez shout, but still nowhere near. Now, this one's a kind of interesting one. So, despite Brownhill scoring 2 goals in just one game, I think that was in the pre-season friendlies, him being hyped up in the FPL community, he won't score more than 2 goals across all 38 Premier League games this season, which was technically true. Actually, it was technically true because Brownhill only scored 2 goals. He got 3 assists as well in the 2021-22 season. But the reason why he was kind of not necessarily overhyped, but hyped, was because people were looking for a really, really cheap 4.5 million midfielder to just sit on their bench, basically. And they were trying to find the perfect 4.5 million midfielder to sit on the bench. And a lot of people did end up going for Brownhill. He wasn't overhyped at all. He ended up being the 3rd highest scoring 4.5 midfielder in the game. Only Ramsey and Gordon beat him. And with Ramsey and Gordon, we had no idea that they would be kind of emerging and playing first team football. So out of the players, the 4.5 million midfielders who, you know, we knew were going to play regularly throughout the season, Brownhill was by far, you know, the best 4.5 million midfielder to go for. So not overhyped at all. With the information we had and the outcome, it turns out that Brownhill was a great shout for that, you know, 4.5 million bench option, I guess. Ramsey and Gordon would have been nice if we could have seen the future on that one. But, you know, I think actually, I don't think Brownhill was overhyped at all. So I'm going to call this a dub L. I don't know. There's parts of both. Salah will continue his fall on overall points as he has each year. In my opinion, won't be a must-have and shouldn't. So, yeah, basically the trend before this season started was that Salah was scoring slightly less points in every Premier League season. So, for example, in 17-18, his first season at Liverpool, he scored 303 FPL points. In 18-19, he scored 259. In 19-20, he scored 233. In 2021, he scored 231. So you can see how it's dropping each year. But in 21-22, he scored 265 points, which ended up being his 2nd best point scoring season. So the trend completely buckled. Salah ended up scoring a hell of a lot of points, you know, being the top point scoring player in FPL, and was absolutely a must-have for significant parts of the season, particularly that first half of the season. If you didn't have Salah, if you didn't think Salah was a must-have, you were finding yourself so far behind the crowd. Salah won't get 12 or more goals. Oh, another huge L, I'm afraid. He got 23 goals, which was his 2nd best total since playing in the Premier League. So, yeah, those people doubting Salah pre-season, huge L. Melia will be the highest scoring goalkeeper this season, and to be fair, there were some positive signs, and you know, I felt it myself that Melia could have a really good season at Leeds. Leeds looked like they tightened up defensively in the second half of last season, but it just didn't happen at all. It was really bad for Leeds defenders in general, and Melia ended up being the 15th best goal-scoring goalkeeper of the season. So not even close, particularly as he was first choice the whole season. Some of the other goalkeepers did kind of rotate a little bit, and that's why they scored slightly less points. So Melia ended up being pretty much one of the worst goalkeepers you could have possibly picked. Now, this one came off massively, so avoid Melia/Ailing, as I can see Leeds suffering from 2nd season syndrome. Teams will have figured them out by now, and I think they relied on their system as opposed to quality personnel last season, which I don't see them improving too much right now. Teams will adapt, and you know what? yeah, Leeds ended up being, having a pretty poor season overall. They could have been relegated. They just about survived on the last day of the season. So those Leeds players, aside from Rafinha, were all kind of avoids for the entire season, which going into the season, it didn't look like that would be the case. But this person here decided that he could see the future. He could see the future and see that Leeds were just going to bomb tragically. Benteke will score 12 goals or more. I have a good feeling about this Palace project. Well, the Palace project was good. As for the 12 goals, he scored 4. Having a good bench makes no difference. If your starters is good enough, there's no need for a bench. Well, yeah, due to COVID postponements particularly, the bench was more important than ever in the 2021-22 season, particularly, around that winter period. Having the bench was so important, and having a strong bench really did make the difference. And those who adapted to a strong bench the quickest were the people who saw the biggest rank rises. So, yeah, maybe this one was a little bit unlucky, but it's still an L because having the bench ended up being, really important. Not, it made a big difference. Trent Alexander-Arnold, although being an obvious option for points, hinders the rest of your team massively, which I think could make a net loss points, and I think he is a bit of a risk. He was the 3rd highest point scorer overall at the end of the season, and arguably the most essential player of the season. He's the only player I had in my own team that was literally in my team every week from game week 1 till game week 38. He was, 7.5 million at the beginning of the season. He ended up, around the 8.5 million mark. So people were still buying him at that point. So if we're saying that he wasn't worth the money at the beginning of the season when he was at his cheapest, people were still buying him for 8.5. So he ended up being so crucial. This one is a huge L, unfortunately, because Trent was absolutely essential by the end of the season. Arguably the most essential player because of his price, because of his position, and because of his point scoring. So, yeah, Trent was not a risk at all. Timo Werner will be among the top 5 for points, most points in FPL this season. Now, this is a pretty bold prediction. Guys, where do you think Werner ranked in terms of, total FPL points? Do you think he scored? We know he wasn't in the top 5, but do you think he was in the top 50? Do you think he was in the top 100? He wasn't. Do you think he was in the top 150? No. Top 200? No. He was the 224th highest scoring player of this season. So this is a fat L, a fat L. We've got some bigger L's though coming up, guys. Pepe over 200 points this season. No. Only 5 players scored over 200 points in the 2021-22 season. Pepe was not one of them. He scored just 45 points. That's that's not even enough to make up just appearance per game week. That's less than a point per less than 2 points per game week. It's only just above 1 point per game week. That was. I mean, I admire the bold prediction, but that couldn't have been more ambitious and more wrong if it tried. Bowen will score 170 plus points and will continue to take pens for West Ham. He had them in pre-season. He didn't take penalties, so that bit was incorrect, but he did score 206 points this season and ended up being the 4th highest scoring player in the game. So, Joshua, who predicted that Bowen would have a great season, even he didn't predict just how much of an insane season Bowen did have in the end. To be the 4th highest scoring player in FPL, being a kind of 6.5 million midfielder playing for West Ham was really, really unexpected. He went absolutely mad. A lot of us thought he would have a good season overall, but no one could predict just how good it would be. And finally, because I quite like this one, Ward-Prowse will score 10 plus goals and earn a place in the team of the season. Now, I remember looking at this one and thinking, there is just no way this happened. And fair enough, Ward-Prowse did not make team of the season, but he did end up scoring 10 goals. It ended up, outscoring players like Bruno Fernandes, a lot of the Man City midfielders. He was actually the 20th highest point scorer in the entire FPL season because he got 5 assists as well and got a lot of those bonus points because, he was kind of the best FPL asset at Southampton over the course of the entire season. So it really is interesting. Ward-Prowse is a kind of player who, if you're going to pick him for your FPL team, you kind of just have to own him for the entire season and play him every game because you never really know when he's going to pop up with a free kick goal or something like that. You never know when he's going to pop up with those points. It happens pretty much randomly. So he's a player you kind of, if you're going to have him, pick him and stick with him, and he can be the best bargain player in the whole of FPL, basically. But, you know, that's not how we usually play FPL. We usually look for something a little bit more exciting, a little bit more predictable, and that's why a lot of people do not get the benefit of a James Ward-Prowse. But, hey, this guy predicted a big season from Ward-Prowse. I wonder if he ended up picking him, and it happened. Right, there we go, guys. That is the end of the video. Just a little fun video, I guess, during the off-season. I think we'll do another one of these next year, no, so next season. So I will ask you guys, probably on Twitter, to be honest, when the game launches, we'll ask for some of your unpopular opinions, and then at the end of the season, we'll review them again. So stay tuned for that one. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at FPL Mate. Do keep an eye on that one. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Fun little preseason video. We'll do a couple more of these before the game launches. I think the new game is probably going to launch at the end of June. But until then, let's just have a little bit of fun. So guys, if you did enjoy, please do leave a like. If you haven't done already, please do subscribe. But aside from that, guys, thank you so much for watching once again, and I will see you later, mates. Bye-bye.